cannot be intimidated. Senate vows after hoodlums snatch maize.
Federal government orders probe as condemnation trails maize snatching in the Senate.
Nigeria is and shall remain an open trading economy, deepening regional integration governed by the rule of trade law.
Let's work collectively towards preserving global trading order, President Buhari tells Commonwealth leaders.
On Good Morning Nigeria today, we will obviously be focusing on the invasion of the Senate, plus matters arising from the Petroleum Industry Governance Bill.
The National Assembly has experienced a lot of controversies since the return to democratic governance in 1999. But no one saw what happened in the hallowed chamber of the Senate at Wednesday's plenary, coming as past disputes and grievances and even fights were done without the involvement of outsiders.
That's right, Kirian. Now, the country had also witnessed physical combat in the National Assembly before, as sometimes happens in other jurisdictions. But the invasion of the chamber by non-members to cut away the maize was not only alien to the apex Nigerian legislature, but also brought, some say, a new and dangerous dimension to internal disputes in the legislature.
Yes, and whatever the motive of the aggrieved legislator was, he seems not to have achieved it, as the Senate resumed sitting few minutes after the maize was carted away, as another maize was provided. The action has, however, generated a lot of discourse among Nigerians with diverse views on the issue.
Well, that's to be expected, Kirian, but the underlying factor is that people who are not supposed to be in the chamber of the National Assembly freely, as it were, walked in, removed the parliament symbol of authority, and then got away without any challenge from persons who are also assigned to ensure that there is security in and around the National Assembly.
And there are many questions that need answers, Kingsley, but things will become clearer as events unfold. Already, the Senate President, Bukola Saraki, who was away in Washington for the spring meeting, has issued a statement reiterating what the Deputy Senate President had said earlier, that it will be thoroughly investigated and all culprits will face justice.
Now, the federal government, as the executive branch, has equally expressed shock over the incident and directed security agencies to immediately unravel the circumstances surrounding the breach of security that led to the invasion and then, of course, the cutting away of the maize. And the federal government also says that security in and around the National Assembly will be reinforced.
Now, Senator Ovieomo Agege, who is said to be behind the situation as a reaction to his suspension last week, has been arrested by the police, and it is expected that the other actors will be arrested as well to return the maize and begin legal proceedings.
All right, well, there will be many Nigerians, of course, who have expressed a number of opinions, diverse opinions, as you earlier indicated. We are having experts and indeed stakeholders come to our studios this morning to indeed elaborate further on the development in the Senate yesterday and what impact that will have on the National Assembly going forward, and what will the Senate and indeed by extension the National Assembly do to forestall future reoccurrence.
And that's right, Kingsley. We are beginning with this edition where our team of discussants will dissect the issue before we get into the second leg of our program today, which also has to do with the National Assembly.
That's right, Kirian. Now, the Petroleum Industry Governance Bill, which had been in the National Assembly for several years, was finally passed recently. And this was after it was segmented into several other bills. In other words, 4 sets of bills to enable the passage, it was said, of less controversial areas instead of having the omnibus petroleum industry bill that had languished for several years in the crucible. That will be our second topic for conversation today.
Yes, and there are matters arising from the past PIGB bill, and these are what will be discussed on Good Morning Nigeria today. I am Kirian Umayo.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join Kirian and also welcome you to the program, reaching you as always on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. It's a live broadcast. In the course of the program, we have our regular companion segments, newspaper review, business, sports, foreign, and others. Before then, here is our other colleague with the morning news highlights, Agua Vivian Onyedibia. Hi, Vivian.
Hi, Kingsley. Good morning, Kirian. Good morning, Nigerians, and welcome to the news. Pandemonium ensued on the floor of the Senate on Wednesday when early in the sitting, a gang of hoodlums breached National Assembly security and entered the Senate chambers. National Assembly correspondent Dennis Adegunloye reports that the hoodlums, who were alleged supporters of recently suspended Senator representing Delta Central, Ovie Omoagege, attacked sergeant-at-arms officials and made away with the mace.
They passed through this entrance, passed through all the gates, and left the National Assembly with that mess. They attempted kidnapping 2 of our senators. They were eventually left. But we decided that we will not be intimidated by any circumstance.
Members decided eventually that we must visit here, so solidarize not with you alone, to tell Nigerians that this 8th Assembly is going to make sure that democracy must work in Nigeria.
Thank the Deputy Speaker and our colleagues from the House of Representatives. I want to assure you that we will refuse to be intimidated. We're going to carry out our assignment fully. We've decided to go through everything on our other papers today.
The Department of State Security and the Inspector General of Police are urged to recover the mace within 24 hours. Senator representing Delta Central, Ovie Omoagege, was subsequently led out by the police after plenary. Meanwhile, the House of Representatives has condemned the snatching of the mace at the Senate chamber. This came up when the House resumed Wednesday's plenary after House members visited the Senate in solidarity.
In any democracy, the legislature remains constant and remains the most vital organ of any democracy. And it is for this reason that I believe this motion and this issue is of vital importance if we want to sustain and keep and nurture our democracy.
So we must also come to the realization that whoever did it were not a bunch of ragtag thugs. There were people who were trained to do that which they have done.
We should stand up and stand on our oath to see that there is peace, there is justice.
We know it is equally important if we have to follow by emotion what happened in the Senate, and we even in the first instance decided not to come and sit today, it will have been a war won by those who came to attack us. The mere fact that we are sitting and we are deliberating shows that we know what we are doing.
And still on the issue, the federal government has expressed shock at the invasion of the National Assembly and the subsequent snatching of the Senate mace by thugs on Wednesday. In a statement, the Minister of Information and Culture, Lai Mohammed, said the security agencies have been directed to immediately unravel the circumstances surrounding the breach of security that led to the invasion. He said the security around the National Assembly complex would be reinforced to prevent a reoccurrence. And similarly, the All Progressives Congress, APC, has also condemned the invasion by suspected thugs to the National Assembly, who took away the mace at the Senate chamber, describing the incidents as attack to the nation's democracy and the desecration of the hallowed institution of the National Assembly. In a statement by Bolaji Abdullahi, the National Publicity Secretary of the APC, the party called on security agencies to take necessary actions to recover the stolen mace and ensure that perpetrators and their sponsors are brought to justice. And away from that, President Muhammadu Buhari has promised to create an enabling environment that will boost revenue generation in Nigeria's oil and gas sector. Adamu Sambo reports that this was when he met with Shell Group in London. And in another development, President Muhammadu Buhari has challenged Commonwealth member nations to work collectively towards preserving the global trading order, supporting regional initiatives as well as domestic structural reforms so as to make business easier for sustainable economic development. While addressing world leaders at the Business Forum in London, the president said that firm commitment to ease of doing business by the Commonwealth will multiply wealth, expand employment opportunities, and spur growth.
Its composition and experience is uniquely positioned to grasp the opportunity to implement bold measures for trade and investment facilitation, hence making business easier between Commonwealth countries, has the potential to generate much-needed resources for sustainable development. Nigeria is and shall remain an open trading economy, deepening regional integration governed by the rule of trade law.
The Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation says 32 states benefited from the Ecological Fund Office. Jide Onifade reports that this was part of briefings by ministries, departments and agencies on the implementation of approved projects which have been on the front burner at the Federal Executive Council meeting, among other issues.
71 completed, 23 ongoing, both with the Federal Executive Council approval and the ministerial approval.
Memos that were considered by Council from Transportation Aviation. And there is one with the cost of 2,588,729,868 and 14 kobo including of all taxes, is for the purpose of AIS automation, Aeronautical Information System automation project. Second memorandum considered was for the provision of ILS, that is Instrument Landing System, Category 3. If you do Category 3, it means that even blindfolded, you can land an aircraft with zero visibility.
Well, that's the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Kirian and Kinsley after this break.
Unemployment, notably youth unemployment, features strongly in our party's manifesto. We intend to attack the problem promptly through revival of agriculture.
The 30K is going a long way. Actually, I bought an acre of land for 60K like 2012, and presently I have a cassava farm and a yam farm.
Caring for the patients of typhoid and diarrhea is our responsibility. And these illnesses are often spread due to eating with unclean hands. So I recommend Dettol, as it protects from up to 100 illness-causing germs. That's why I want to be Dettol sure. Dettol, be 100% sure.
Dettol soap is now also available for 100 Naira only.
Reorganized, trained, and fully equipped, we are the new improved Nigeria Police Force. We fight crime. We bust syndicates. Whatever the crime, wherever the hideout, the Nigeria Police Force will get you busted. Stop kidnapping, armed robbery, murder, pipeline vandalism, and other criminal activities. Be productive. Be security conscious. Join the police force to secure your life and property. This message is from the Nigeria Police Force Public Relations Department.
Go to my son's room. Get pregnant.
Countless women suffer under the misconception that when a woman is childless or fails to conceive within the clock time set for her by family and society, then it must be the woman's fault.
Enough is enough. She must leave my son's house.
So childless women suffer the pains of childlessness, and they also suffer the rejection of family and blame of society. This problem is placed side by side with the issue of those who sell their babies.
You did what? I don't sell my picking.
In this episode, titled Childless Wives, join us this week as a real-cracking comedy takes a semi-comic look at issues of childlessness and child harvesting.
I want to get pregnant as easily as you do it. And I swear by my life, I will die for my child.
Over and out. Brought to you by Glow.
The largest data network, Glow Unlimited.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the daring and invincible Louis the Mosquito. Responsible for 200 malaria cases all on its own. Is there anything that can kill Louis?
Presenting Morty's Our God. Its powerful formula kills malaria mosquitoes fast. So get Morty's Our God.
Caring for the patients of typhoid and diarrhea is our responsibility. And these illnesses are often spread due to eating with unclean hands. So I recommend Dettol, as it protects from up to 100 illness-causing germs. That's why I want to be Dettol sure. Dettol, be 100% sure.
Dettol soap is now also available for 100 Naira only.
All right, well, welcome back. But if you just joined us, it's still Good Morning Nigeria, and we are reaching you on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now it's time for us to talk business, and the Minister of Budget and National Planning, Senator Udo Udoma, is wooing investors in London. Plus, the World Bank raises International Development Association's first bond worth $1.5 billion. Let's join our correspondent, Comfort Amodu, for details of these stories and others.
Welcome to Business News. I'm Comfort Amodu. With economic policy initiatives yielding positive results, coupled with a stable political climate, this is the right time to invest in Nigeria. The Minister of Budget and National Planning, Senator Udo Udoma, told participants at the UK Nigerian Trade and Investment Forum in London that Nigerians' outlook for 2018 and over the medium term is very positive, as the country has exited recession and the economy is steadily growing again. The Revenue Mobilization Allocation and Fiscal Commission says it has so far recovered about 57.7 billion naira unmerited revenues from collecting banks in its effort to boost revenue accruals into the Federation account. The agency said the recovery followed intensive verification and reconciliation of revenue collections and remittances by designated banks engaged by the Nigerian Customs Service and the Federal Inland Revenue Service between July 2012 and December 2015. It says 48.7 billion naira has already been recovered and remitted to the Federation account, while the balance of 9.7 billion naira relating to withholding tax on dividend only has been duly released to benefiting states' boards of internal revenue. In a related development, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, has recovered 216.402 million naira from Swiss Golden Investment, an online investment that purportedly deals in buying and selling of gold bars, which is said to have instead swindled about 7,000 Nigerians of a total sum of 3 billion naira. A statement from the spokesman, EFCC Zonal Officer Kano Idris Ishaku, said the recovery was sequel to a petition the commission received from thousands of complainants who alleged that they invested in Swiss Golden Company Limited, which was advertised as an online investment that deals in buying and selling of gold bars. The petitioners had alleged that after investing over R1 billion into the business, Swiss Golden refused to pay them any dividend or pay them back their capital. The International Development Association has launched first bond in its nearly 60-year history as investors around the globe seize the opportunity to invest in a AAA-rated asset and support life-changing investments. The bond, which marks the launch of IDA's borrowing program in the global capital market, raised $1.5 billion to address some of the most pressing development issues. A quick look at the equities market. The attention of the economic and financial world is on Washington, D.C., where the 2018 spring meeting is currently on, and business among Nigerians' large delegation is the Chairman House Committee on Banking and Currency, Jones Onyenyere, who says fiscal and monetary policy makers in Nigeria must align and work together for the common good of the country.
Try to reduce inflation. We should also find a way of growing the economy. And for me, or as a legislator, we've always come up with this idea that for them to really get it right, they must, we've said this, for the often time, they must set up the Financial Services Commission, especially as a developing country.
That's it on Business News for now. I'm Comfort Amadu. Good Morning Nigeria continues.
And thank you very much indeed, Comfort. And on Good Morning Nigeria, newspaper review is next.
Our newspaper reviewer, Bayo Atoyebe, is here with us in the studios for the review session. Bayo, good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Kingsley.
Good morning, Bayo.
And good morning, Nigeria.
All right, as should be expected, I mean, any newspaper that doesn't have its front page covered with the stories out of the Senate, of course, will have missed out, except it is a weekly, and therefore they didn't have the story that broke yesterday. Pretty sad development for the Nigerian legislature. Daily Independent is our first port of call, and the front page is, of course, busy with the headline, riders and photographs. Condemnation trails invasion of Senate and seizure of maize. And you have 6 riders, so that maize snatching, saga disgraceful and dangerous. That's Balarabe Musa. Action, humiliation of Nigeria's democracy. That's attributed to CSOs. And APC presidency emboldened NAS invasion. That's a claim by PDP. We will mete out sanctions where necessary, says the presidency. It's assault on Nigeria's democracy, according to Atiku, and federal government others probe. Now you can see the photographs there on the front page of the Daily Independent. It said the struggle there between one of the invaders who snatched the maize from its position, and then the sergeant at arms. That's the first photograph. And then the other, photograph is the item 2, actually should have been 1. And then you see the photograph immediately below that, that's 1. It seems to have been a relay, because the gentleman who now had the maize wasn't the one that snatched it in the first instance. But they were taking it away out of the National Assembly. And then the third photograph there shows policemen and the Senator Ovie Omoagege, who represents Delta Central and who is alleged to have been the center of it all. That's for Daily Independent. For the Punch newspaper, virtually the same thing, except that for the rendering of the headline, shock and anger as thugs invade Senate, escape with maize. That's on page 2 in greater detail. National Assembly gives IG, DG, SS 24 hours to recover maize. Ekweremadu meets Oshibajo as federal government orders investigation. Omoagege denies accusation that he masterminded invasion, and APC, PDP, ACF, Atiku, others condemn invasion and theft. Now you have more photographs on the front page of the Punch newspaper there out of the Senate, and then you can see for St. Paul, the escape That's the SUV in which the invaders bolted with the maize. For the Authority newspaper, virtually the same thing.
All right. New Telegraph here also has the same, but not the major headline now. But the photograph or the pictures here actually show the same as in other newspapers. But what could be worrisome somehow here is that Ghanaian lawmakers were watching as the thugs abduct Senator Mays. And now the photograph are the same. You could see the alleged mastermind of the snatching of the maize, the person of Senator Viomo Agege being escorted by the police. And then we have writers here. Suspended Senator thugs invade chamber, police arrest Omo Agege, how thugs abducted Senator. Senate gives IGP DSS 24 hours to recover maize. And APC, perpetrators sponsor must face justice. That's coming from APC. And of course, Saraki comments colleagues. But on Daily Sun, it's titled Madness, with a writer here. Gang attacks Senate, seizes maize, senator, 4 others arrested. Outrage over desecration of parliament. Ekparimadu briefs Oshebajo, that's the vice president. And that's it for the Daily Sun on this particular matter. Bayo.
Well, 5 persons have been arrested and the maize has been discovered. A passersby saw the maize by the second flyover before the stadium and alerted the police. Already there was a police alert around the Federal Capital Territory and the maize has been recovered. But meanwhile, the 5 persons have been described as gangs, hoodlums, thugs, invaded the National Assembly. The curious thing, however, is that a newspaper has published that at the National Assembly, there are 100 policemen attached to the National Assembly, 300 sergeants at arms, 50 officers of the Nigerian Civil and Defense Corps, 50 officers of the Department of State and Security Service. How did 5 persons beat this fortress of security? And ironically, only on Tuesday at plenary, when Senator Adoke Onasarawa was drawing the Senate's attention to the killings in Nasarawa State, the Senate, as part of the resolution, has said they probably will consider closing the Senate to help the presidency tackle the insecurity in the nation. Now, they were trying to remove the log in the eye of the nation as far as security is concerned, while there was a speck in their own eye. The challenge of security is very serious. It's across the nation, but this time that it has come home to our seat of democracy, the citadel of democracy, maybe both the executive and the National Assembly, as well as the judiciary, will all strongly sit and take serious actions so that we can address it. But there have been reactions about it. Some describe it as a criminal act, others say it is treasonable felony. The All Progressive Congress says it is an attack on a nation's democracy. However, some politicians have said that politicians should be advised to desist from threatening our democracy. Others are saying this is what the kind of response you get when people are provoked. They act on the heat of passion and later on lead to regret. Not related to this, but also concerned, Lagos lawyer Femi Falana has described as illegal and unconstitutional the suspension of a legislator by a legislature. He says no legislative house can suspend or remove a member. It is only a court of law or the constituency that elected that legislator that can order the removal or suspension of that. He cited a case that has been ruled, that was in the case of a Bauchi State House of Assembly lady who was suspended indefinitely for the statement she made on the floor. The Court of Appeal has held that the legislative house has no such powers. It may be recalled that a court also had ruled that the suspension of former Senate leader, Senator Ali Ndume, was illegal because he went beyond the 18 days that was required. That also is pending in the Court of Appeal.
Yeah, well, that's a number of issues that you've touched on. I'm sure that the question of the suspension of the senator and the reactions there to these are matters that will continue to linger. And questions people are asking is whether the resort to self-help was the best in the circumstance. That's one. Not. And secondly, Kirian, anything could have happened inside the chamber of the Senate yesterday. Yes. Virtually anything could have happened.
And people are beginning to think whether there are insiders, who also collaborated, with those that came, because it was so easy for them to do that, without anybody harassing them.
When was the last time you tried to get to the National Assembly? It's not easy. It's like having a horse pass through the eye of a needle. Yeah. How these people were able to drive into the Senate premises and
then drive off.
Granted that they went into the chambers following the suspended senator, and therefore that probably was the basis of their access. But to take the maze and scroll through the corridors of the National Assembly, where there are 300 sergeant-at-arms. Sergeant-at-arms are the security for the National Assembly, the official security.
All right, Bayo, thanks a lot. As I said, anything could have happened. All people will need to do is also recall what happened in 1966 inside the Parliament of South Africa in Cape Town. What happened to the Prime Minister, Hendrik Verwoerd. It's 1966 inside the Parliament. All right, let's return to the Punch newspaper and then take these headlines above the nameplate. Health workers strike paralyzes hospitals. That's on page 16. And World Bank knocks Nigeria and others for rising debts, page 21. U.S. urges Nigeria to change tactics against Boko Haram. That's on page 32. And there are two earpieces there beside the nameplate of the Punch. Court halts planned sale of Nair Mobile, and shareholders demand refund of $43.33 million. Some Nigerian youths not ready to work, says Buhari. And then back again to the front page, just below the photographs that you have from the mayhem in the chambers of the Senate yesterday. You have other headlines that of course, matters arising from stories that broke in the past. Offer robbery. Police arraign hotel owner, workers, and guests. That's on pages 4 and 5. Sex for marks. Committee recommends indefinite suspension of Prof. That's from Obafemi Awolowo University at Ile-Ife. Kirian.
All right. Let's go to the Daily Sun and take some of these stories making headlines there. Just beside the nameplate, 13 soldiers killed, 7 injured in Exercise IM at Baltimore. That's from the defense headquarters. The story is on page 4. Then just beside the photograph, we have weak issues, federal government, oil firms over soot pollution, alleges plan to depopulate rivers, people. The story is on page 7. Then below that, Benue government alleges plot by hired mercenaries to attack communities, on page 9. Herdsmen's attack. 17 victims get mass burial in Nasarawa. That's on page 9 of the Daily Sun. And the New Telegraph, above the nameplate of the New Telegraph, we have IMF warns Nigeria on 21.725 trillion debt. Says borrowed funds should yield higher returns. Fund supports nation's debt strategy. And now below the nameplate, we have some stories, striking stories. Patients stranded as Jesus strike paralyzes hospitals is on page 7. Defense headquarters, 13 soldiers killed during Operation Cartrace. That's on page 6 now. And then prisoners jailed, or rather jailed prisoners, that's those who are jailed for life. They bag master's degree and, of course, enroll for PhD. The story is on page 6. Deputy governor moves out of lodge as a rift with Okorocha deepens. That's the governor of Igbo State. The story is on page 32.
32. Kirian, let's take the editorial. I think it's from this day newspaper.
Yes.
You have it there. Yes.
The editorial for today is actually on the Lassa fever epidemic in Nigeria. This is one disease that has refused to go. Presently, we are talking about over 100 victims of this very disease. And they said on the editorial here that what is even worse is that Nigerians will likely live with the deadly disease for quite a while. We have had the largest outbreak of Lassa fever in Nigeria's history in the first quarter of this year. Bayo.
Well, before we come to the Lassa fever editorial, the running stories. In the offer robbery incident, the hotelier, accountant, a receptionist,
the room cleaner and also the club operator are all facing 2 counts of charging for criminal conspiracy and also causing disappearance of evidence. 4 other guests who were at the hotel have also been charged to court. They were said to be hiding information. And the OAU story, the committee set up by the Vice Chancellor, Professor Itayo Ogubodede, has turned in its report, and they have recommended the suspension of the Randy lecturer who allegedly demanded 5 rounds of sessions to upgrade 33 marks. Now the editorial. You may recall that Lassa fever first broke in the world in a village named Lassa in Borno State. That was in 1969. And that is why that hemorrhagic fever had its name, Lassa. But between that time and now, all initiatives to try and acquire a vaccine to cure that disease or to prevent that disease has not been found. And so, like the editorial is saying, the Center for Disease Control is lamenting that the incidents we have had in this first quarter of this year alone, 101 deaths, is the highest ever in Nigeria. And the Nigeria Medical Association is threatening that they are considering suspending treating Lassa fever patients until something seriously is done.
Okay, Bayo, that's where we leave it for today. We're expecting you back again tomorrow for more analysis on national dailies. This is Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. The program returns in just a moment.
Hate speech is not a joke. It incites genocide and crimes against humanity. Most of Africa's civil wars are caused by hate speech from one tribe against another. We don't want it here. The Nigerian government stands firm against hate speech.
Under no conditions whatsoever should we tolerate or excuse or justify hate speech or hateful conduct of any kind, especially where such is illegal.
There's no doubt that the resurgent push for separatism, as well as the rising cases of ethnic and religious disharmony, are all traceable to the growing phenomenon of hate speech.
One nation bound in freedom, peace and unity.
Nigeria, one nation, one people.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
Hear the call of change. Stand up, Nigeria. Change is here and it's going to stay. Change begins with you. Oh yeah, make we go. But it's also let the change begin from within. Look at you, yeah, change begins with you and me. Change begins with me. Change begins with me.
Give me the value pack. Helen!
You do great value shopping.
Absolutely. I'm a champion at getting value.
Then you must have bought the Harpic 200 ml.
Why Harpic when I have
this? Even after applying them 10 times, they won't give a sparkling clean toilet.
Impossible.
Challenge. Detergent and bleach can't give a sparkling clean toilet even after 10 times. But Harpic 200 ml gives a sparkling clean toilet at one go.
Wow!
Harpic 200 ml. Real deal. Now only 200 naira.
Caring for the patients of typhoid and diarrhea is our responsibility. And these illnesses are often spread due to eating with unclean hands. So I'd recommend Dettol, as it protects from up to 100 illness-causing germs. That's why I want to be Dettol sure. Dettol, be 100% sure.
Dettol soap is now also available for 100 naira only.
When I was a little girl, I loved spending time with Mum and Grandma cleaning the house. I knew what Grandma's secret was. I was so excited to sing in the choir.
And your shirts are always so
white. I knew what Mom's secret was. Today, I'm a modern woman that still trusts the secret passed down to me. It's Jik, of course, the trusted bleach which can be used all around your house for amazing results.
Shh, it's our little secret.
It's no secret. Jik removes 101 stains. Just Jik it.
And to set the stage for our conversation this morning, let's take Dennis Adegunloye's report on the pandemonium in the Senate to set, of course, the discussion going.
It was seemingly a normal day on the floor of the Senate with the usual adoption of votes and proceedings. Then suddenly, some unknown persons who tagged behind recently suspended senator representing Delta Central, Ovie Omo Agege, stormed chambers, attacking sergeant-at-arms officials and making their way towards the mace. An executive session was immediately convened, after which Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives, Yusuf Lassun, led several members on a solidarity visit to their Senate colleagues.
They passed through this entrance, passed through all the gates, and left the National Assembly with that mess. They attempted kidnapping 2 of our senators. They were eventually left. But we decided that will not be intimidated by any circumstance.
Members decided eventually that we must visit here, so solidarize not with you alone, to tell Nigerians that this 8th Assembly is going to make sure that democracy must work in Nigeria.
Thank the Deputy Speaker and our colleagues from the House of Representatives. I want to assure you that we will refuse to be intimidated. We are going to carry out our assignment fully. We've decided to go through everything on our other papers today.
The legislators urged security agencies to spare no effort in retrieving the mace within 24 hours.
So we are giving the Inspector General of Police and the Director SSS to recover our mace within 24 hours.
Meanwhile, Senator representing Delta Central, Ovie Omo Agege, was escorted out at the conclusion of plenary. From the National Assembly, Dennis Adegunloye, NTA News.
All right, thank you very much, Dennis, for that background report. And just to indicate also, as we said in the course of our newspaper review, that the mace has been recovered. And reports said that it was recovered somewhere around the National Stadium here in the Federal Capital Territory. Now we have 3 guests joining us to discuss further the mayhem on the floor of the National Assembly yesterday, in particular the Senate. First, we'd like to welcome Professor of Law, former Governor of Edo State, Osareme Osumbo, who also was a 2-time senator of the Federal Republic. Distinguished Senator, pleasure to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning.
All right. Also here with us, Senator from Bayelsa State, distinguished Senator Ben Mary Bruce, who was right in the thick of it yesterday, not as an actor, but as a witness.
Thank you very much.
Senator Mary Bruce, pleasure to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
All right. We also have on today's program Abdurrahman Abu Hamisu, the teacher, researcher, and public affairs analyst. Nice to have you join us this morning.
It's my pleasure.
Good morning,
Good
Nigeria.
morning, Nigerians.
Gentlemen, you're welcome to the program. And we'd like to begin with Senator Ben Bruce, who my colleague here said was not an actor yesterday, but he was actually present, when that are called. We'd like to know your reaction when that are called. What did you do as a member of the Senate who was present yesterday?
Well, I sit on the back side of the Senate, and I had a lot of commotion. So when I had the commotion, I walked to the entrance. I walked to the entrance because the ladies in the Senate who look after us were being manhandled, and I was wondering what was going on. So I walked to the entrance, and I saw a bunch of guys walking, and one ran to the left with a chair and was throwing it around and broke one of the legs of one of the girls. And I saw Omar Agege in front of me with a bunch of people to his left, right, and back and front of him, protecting him as he was walking into the chambers, and beating up all the staff as they pushed the door open and were walking into the chamber. So I walked up to him and I said, I mean, what's going on? He did not respond. And there was another guy, I call him a cowboy, to his left. I went up to him and I said, what's going on? They did not respond. They walked past me, walked into the chambers. I looked to my left and I saw the girls being molested. They were beating up little girls. They were beating up the women in the chambers. And then the next thing I knew, I looked to my right. They walked up to where the Deputy Senate President was, picked up the mace, and he ran out of the chambers. And Omar Agege then went to his seat and he sat down. And within 3-4 minutes, it was over. That was what happened. In the chambers, and I was in shock. I didn't know how they got in there, why they got in there, and how they could come into the premises. Because I had guests in the morning. 2 Americans came to see me. They couldn't get into the premises. I had to go pick them up myself at 9:30 in my car, bring them in for a meeting, and take them out. So I was shocked that hoodlums could walk in, because it's not that easy to walk into the National Assembly. If you go in there, you have to fill out a form, you have to make a phone call, you have to get you a badge, you come in there, there's a process to get into the National Assembly. So for this to happen so quickly and for them to leave, there is no way in the world you can convince me there was no collusion. It's not possible. Because my guest at 9:30, Dane Walters, couldn't get into the premises. And my brother here, as a former senator, knows you just can't walk into the National Assembly. So it didn't make any sense how that could happen. And worse than that, what was the purpose? It didn't make sense what the purpose was. What did they achieve beyond make us look like we're a banana republic? I don't understand the logic as to why they did it, how they did it. I mean, okay, we thought what happened, but what did they accomplish? They accomplished absolutely nothing.
All right, distinguished Senator, thank you very much. Let's bring in Professor Senator Soreme Osumbo. First, I mean, what was your reaction? And it also speak to the fact of the right of admission into the chamber of the Senate itself. Can anybody just walk into the chamber?
Well, it's not ordinary what happened yesterday. And ordinarily, what we witnessed ought not to happen, because there is a plethora of security agencies, checkpoints that you have to navigate and pass through before you can even enter into the White House, which houses both the Senate chamber and the House of Reps chamber. Even before you enter, at the entrances, both at the front and at the rear, you have a lot of security personnel, police, maybe SSS and other security, including the gadgets, security gadgets, to ensure that you don't bring in offensive weapons into the premises in the National Assembly. For these people to have beat all that security put in place, and then, as we just had, breach the security at the entrance into the Senate chamber really beats anyone's imagination. And I think what happened is truly condemnable. There has been a very huge sense of outrage all over the country, and perhaps even beyond. I'm sure that all over the world, people will be shocked at what happened in Nigeria's Senate chamber yesterday. It's shameful, and as distinguished Senator Bemore Bruce mentioned, I begin to wonder what motivated these people. What is their level of understanding as to how the system works? What did they hope to achieve? It was completely unnecessary and has cast a slur on the integrity of all of us Nigerians, and has tended to desecrate the hallowed chamber of the Senate, which ought to be respected. And for me, that also is a reflection of how far some members of the Nigerian society have degenerated. You know, a lot of things have gone wrong. We see desecration of other sacred places across the length and breadth of Nigeria. But carrying this into the hallowed chamber of the Senate is another completely different level of its own. And I think every right-thinking Nigerian ought to condemn what we witnessed yesterday.
Thank you, Professor Osumbo. And from the remarks now that you have made, Senator Ben Bruce did tell us here that they came in the company of the man who has been alleged to be the mastermind. That's another aspect of this conversation. But now let's go to Abdulrahman Abu Hamisu. Well, you're not a senator, but I'm sure you have watched on TV the pandemonium on food yesterday at the Hallowed Chamber. What's your reaction?
Well, for me, it's part of the impunity that has taken hold of our psyche in Nigeria. Because people believe they can do anything and get away with it without being punished, and then we could just sit and just think that this is what we need to do, and we go ahead to execute our plans because we are not thinking of any repercussion. It is unfortunate, distinguished Senator Muribus and Senator Osubo was it is surprising that they were able to beat the security arrangement in National Assembly. You see, beneath the facade of having security put in place is the issue of enforcement. You could have a lot of roadblock, checkpoints, and people smuggle arms across the length and breadth of this nation. Nobody has done anything about that. And then if you cascade it to the larger society, you find a situation whereby you find all the coercive apparatuses of the state across the length and breadth of this nation, and crimes are being committed. Nobody is being punished for not performing his or her duties and responsibilities. So people have this sense of nothing will happen. So they could do anything. As security officer, you allow people to beat you people in National Assembly, went into the other chamber of the Senate and then pick the mayors and go away, because you're not thinking somebody will come to ask questions as to who did what and why did you allow these people to go into the National Assembly. So we have this sense of nothing will happen, and then we do whatever we want to do. But if you have a sense of responsibility and you know that your integrity is at stake as somebody who is in charge of security at the National Assembly, you won't want a breach, not for 1 minute, so that people will continue to have confidence in your leadership wherever you are posted to. But that is not what is happening in Nigeria. So what is happening for me is condemnable. It's something that we must not condone. It is something that all lovers of democracy, peace, and stability in Nigeria must rise up to condemn.
All right, Habisu, thank you very much. Let's come back to the two senators, one serving and then the other former. Gentlemen, after the outrage, what would you like to see?
Well, first of all, I need to understand what the purpose was. It beats my imagination. No senator was scared. Nobody was worried. We found another mace. We continued with proceedings. I spoke to Senator Saraki yesterday. He's going to be back soon, Senator Kwerimadu. We're going to continue working. So nobody was scared. Democracy wasn't threatened. We were irritated. So what purpose did it serve? I don't understand. You don't come and steal a mace in broad daylight in front of cameras where your pictures are taken. Sooner or later, you will be caught. You will be caught. You will be prosecuted, unless the collusion is greater than my imagination. So what purpose who steals in broad daylight with every single network taking your picture? Do you understand the stupidity? I mean, this crime will go down as one of the dumbest crimes in the world. You know, they have a TV program for stupid people. This will go down as a stupid, ridiculous crime. It's not going to intimidate us. They kidnapped one of our senators. When the mace was taken away, Senator Solomon was pushed into the truck with the mace, taken almost at the gate, and he was thrown out of the vehicle. Senator Yayi from Lagos State. He was thrown out of the vehicle, and then they left. So there was, in addition to that, there's kidnapping. Now, they do all of this. They will spend many, many years in prison. The pictures all over the place. I don't care how dumb the security operatives are. The police ultimately will get them. So, ultimately, what did they achieve? It was an attempted coup. It was the dumbest coup in the world. So, I am amused by what they did. I am incensed. But worse than that, they've ridiculed Nigeria, the rest of the world. That is what annoys me the most. They've ridiculed Nigeria. We're not intimidated by these comedians. They're not going to stop us. We're going to sit at 11 o'clock today.
All right, thank you. Yes.
Senator Osumbo, what would you, after the outrage or beyond the outrage, what would you like to say?
Well, as Abdurrahman mentioned, I think there is a widespread feeling amongst Nigerians that in a democracy you are free to do whatever you want to do, and there are no consequences to such action. I think we need to correct that. And this is one instance where that message should be driven home very forcefully, that you cannot get away with this kind of impunity. There are consequences for this kind of criminal action. It is by so doing that you will impress it in the minds of Nigerians that, yes, there's a lot of freedom in a democracy, but you don't, there are extents, there are limits to which you can go, and that if you go beyond those limits, there are consequences for such actions. This has to be glaringly and forcefully demonstrated in this kind of situation. It is sad, and as has been said, what happened was stupid. It lacks any sense of any real purpose. It didn't serve any useful purpose. But I would not want to go beyond that to describe it as an act of terrorism or an attempt to overthrow. Because when you begin to talk about treason, you are talking of an attempt to overthrow a government. But this wasn't. I don't even think that was their intention. Probably the police is going to carry out their investigations and get to the root of this, but I would not imagine that their intention was to overthrow government. Maybe their intention was to assist in their own thinking whoever may have brought them into the chamber. They were sympathetic to the senator who was placed on suspension by the Senate. But if their attempt was to assist their friend or senator, this was a wrong way to go about it. It was completely counterproductive and may even add to the problems of the senator in the long run. So my take on this is that, yes, let's demonstrate that this kind of action cannot be tolerated. Unfortunately, Nigerians, and maybe these people themselves, have been seeing legislators scrambling and fighting over misses in various houses of assembly. But this has never happened in the Senate. And what we witness are legislators amongst themselves, maybe change of leadership, removal and impeachment of speakers and so forth and so on, presiding officers. But this is a situation where outsiders breached the security in the Senate chamber, and it wasn't limited to senators themselves. So this takes it to a completely different dimension, and I do hope that we will never see something as disgraceful as this again.
Now, let's return to Senator Ben Bruce, because this issue of cutting where the maize did not start today, it happened in the past. If you remember vividly, Kingsley, that it happened during the Okadibo era, and this is the president.
The original scene was in the Western House in 1962.
Exactly, and the difference here is that there are outsiders, and you were present when it happened. Now, prior to this act of yesterday, the drama of yesterday, somebody was suspended.
Yes.
And among those whom you described walking into the chamber, he was with the gang, so to speak. Now, you talked about collusion, ruling out collusion in all of this. What kind of collusion are you talking about?
Because it, what you call a comedy of errors. First of all, the intention made no sense. Like my brother here has said, it made no sense. Whatever the intention was, it defies logic. You can't achieve your objective. Whatever series of possible objectives you had in doing that is totally illogical. They took the maize, we found another one, a backup in 1 hour. You disrupted proceedings for 1 hour, we continued working. Okay? Now, Senator Omagege came in with these guys. Okay? They came in together because I was right there in front, and I was the welcome committee, and they break a young lady's leg. Now, what was the objective? I don't get it. I don't get the objective. So they walked in there. The guy was suspended. He went to court. But that is not the way to resolve a legal problem. That is not the way to resolve an issue he was asked to take the matter out of court, and he would have resolved it peacefully with the Senate President. The Senate President is a wonderful human being. He's a nice person. The institution would have worked out a settlement with him. There was no need for any of this. So
if resort to self-help.
There was no need. If you were suspended for something you did and you went and had a conversation, you could have resolved it, because the Senate, unlike the House, is full of older people. And we're not likely to throw punches or likely to fight over a maze in the Senate. Look at the former senator here. Can you imagine him throwing punches in the Senate? It's not like him. He will never do that. So if they thought there would be a fight in the Senate, that's not going to happen. Nobody's going to fight.
All right, Senator Bruce, thanks a lot. Abdul Rahman Hamisul, let's bring you again into the conversation. Senator Osumbo mentioned something, and is there a sense in which public perception probably doesn't make a distinction between the scuffles that you see on television involving lawmakers themselves inside the chamber, most often at the State House of Assembly, usually when they want to change their presiding officers, and then the, if you like, the procurement of external elements to do what it did in the Senate yesterday. Do people see all of this as, part of the, to use the common lingo, ruffle that goes on in the legislature?
Well, it is unfortunate that we're witnessing all of this in this part of the world. I believe that as legislators, the first thing you need to do is to be obedient to the laws of the land. Because you cannot be a lawmaker when you flout the laws of the land. It doesn't make sense. But what we're used to doing in this part of the world is never to obey the laws. There are processes for impeaching or for removing any leadership. But because most of the times personal interests always supersede the interests of the people that the legislators are representing, most times this is what happens. So that once somebody is occupying an office, it personalizes that office, and saying that you have to give way, the same people that ask you, the same people that voted you or elected you among themselves are the people that are saying, okay, we no longer want you. And you want to hold on by force. And then what happened? We resort to self-help. And this is what we've been witnessing. We personalize whatever we're doing, the offices we're occupying, and we see it as our personal property. It's either me or nobody. But that is not always the case. So that is what has led us to where we are, that people that are supposed to be the first people to show example in terms of obeying the laws, in terms of following processes and procedures in getting things done, are the same persons that are flouting all of this. So the perception out there is, by the time you see them fighting, it is not about us. It is about their own individual interest. And that is why nobody wants to make sacrifices. But in legislative business, the first thing that needed to come to anybody's mind that is represented, that is elected to represent the people, either at the state level, the state houses of assembly, or local government, or national assembly, is first of all to be obedient to the law, and then follow processes and procedure.
All right, Habisu, thank you very much. Gentlemen, let's recall something that happened in the Second Republic so that we can, for the benefit of our viewers, properly contextualize what has happened in the Senate. There was an incident involving Honorable C.D. Ali, National Assembly, the Second Republic, while the National Assembly was still in Lagos. It was a gun incident inside the chamber of the House of Representatives. Now, is it outrage because this involved outsiders, or because the maze was snatched? Again, we refer to the original scene, what happened in the Western House of Assembly in 1962. Was it the outrage because you had outsiders come in, or because senators themselves were not the ones who were involved in this mayhem?
No, look, whether it's C.D. Ali or these comedians that showed up yesterday, none of it is right. It is wrong, it is disgraceful, it is unacceptable, it is illegal, and should not be accepted in the modern society. You don't see this happening in the United States Congress. And the more we do things like this, the more we're seen as a banana republic. Politicians, they say all politics is local, and I agree. However, in today's world, once you stand on the floor of the Senate to make a speech, you're talking to the world. You're not talking to your village anymore. You're talking to the United States president. You're not talking to the British prime minister. You're talking to some guy in Canada. You're talking to some guy in your village. So you have to conduct yourself as a statesman or a stateswoman. And so those days where you did things like that, okay, you can do this when there was only WNTV and only FRCN and there was no internet. Today, the world is different. You can't get away with that today. Don't forget, when we meet our colleagues across the world, they'll see you as barbarians. You can't have a conversation. It's like when a minister goes abroad to the British Parliament and has a conversation, and you represent poor people, and you walk in there with a $200,000 watch. And they look at you, they say, you represent poor people and you're wearing a $200,000 watch. They first of all call you a criminal. They call you a criminal. Or you walk in there driving a Rolls Royce. The world has changed. While the speaker in America sleeps in his office because he has no money to go home. You see, people need to think as the world. You can't think as you're in your village where you have slaves and you're dealing with slaves. Okay, that mentality is over. And if you hold that mentality, whether you're in government, out of government, or you're a criminal, you have to think about the world and not think about some local environment as if you're beating your houseboy in your house. And this is exactly what is happening. That is why I need to trivialize what they have done for them to understand that they are not as bright as they think they are. And that's why I call them comedians.
Scuffle of these natures, has also been witnessed in other climes, not just Nigeria, other majorly developing nations.
That's the word you use, developing nations.
Now, why is it
not developed?
Okay, now developing nations.
Yes.
Yes, and why is it so common among congresses in those climes, developing nations? Why is it? Because of course that borders on the character of the people involved, especially those who are representing the poor people, as Senator Bruce did say. So why is it that they are unable to conduct themselves properly, as distinguished they are referred to? I'd like you to come in here because you have been in research for a while, and you must have read about some of the scuffles of
developing nations
across the globe. So what is different?
You see, mostly two reasons are responsible. The first one, which is the most important one, is personal interest. And then second one is lack of respect for dissenting views. And the essence of democracy is all about dissenting views. It's all about argument. It's all about persuasion. It's all about canvassing for issues that are dear to you or the people you are representing. But in developing countries, we don't like opposition. We don't like dissenting views. We want everything yes, 100% yes. And that is why even in our conduct, it shows in our conduct. For instance, you find states where a particular party is ruling. Once local government election is conducted, from the councillor down to the chairman, it is the ruling party in that state that will win the election. There is no any opposition party that will win even a councillor in that. So we hate dissenting views. So if I'm in charge, and I want you to, follow my argument and support it. By the time you refuse to support it, then you become my enemy, and I'm ready to deal with you as my enemy. But in democracy, it's all about fair views, fair representation. It's about persuasion. It's about talking to one another. That is why it is called politics. Man has evolved from that primitive society where if I fail, you offend me, and I possess the power to crush you, I crush you and move on. The essence of politics is for men to come together, to interact, to talk, without fisticuff, without any bodily harm or any injury. And that is why it is called politics. And that is why people prefer democracy all over the world. But once people have a strong view about any particular issue, they don't want a dissenting voice. So even the suspension in the National Assembly, I look at it from that very particular perspective. Because as somebody, as a man, first of all, it's my right and responsibility to hold a thought and to canvass for it, whether it is acceptable to my colleagues or not. So if I do that, it is not out of place for me to have a dissenting. Even in courts, you have dissenting rulings or judgment, where you have, say, more than 5 judges that needed to rule on a particular issue. You find like 4 concurring to each other, 2 dissenting. It is allowed, and that is the essence of democracy. And that is why we say majority will have their way and minority will always have their say. So this is the issue.
All right, thank you very much. Senator Osumbo, what's your take on this? The question I asked Senator Ben Bruce a moment ago with regard to what the source of the outrage is. Is it because you have outsiders involved, or because it is the Senate?
Well, I think he gave the most direct and cogent reason for that, which is the availability of the media. The media, we have multiple number of different media organizations. There's the internet, and the story spreads very quickly. The incident that you mentioned regarding Sidi Ali, I'm sure that a very small fraction of Nigerians witnessed it. They may have heard about it, but the power of sight, the audio-visual, is present in this case. And that is very powerful. And these days, you will be surprised, as it was breaking, the news was breaking all over the world. All Nigerians, all people over the world saw what happened. So I think that is really the reason, the main reason why this has taken this dimension. But in addition, it is the new factor of outsiders penetrating. And this has been happening in the state houses of assembly, never in the Senate, never in the National Assembly. So for this to happen in a national, our National Assembly takes it to a completely different dimension. But let me quickly say, because I know time is short now, is that while we focus on what has happened in the Senate, what happened yesterday, I would also like us to situate this within what is happening in the entire Nigerian society, the attitude of Nigerians. We talked about attitude towards the law. People tend to feel they can get away with a lot of things. But as I said in my opening remarks, a lot of places are being desecrated. Churches, people have been known to go to churches where people are worshiping and just slaughter them. The Boko Haram thing is very much with us. In the universities, we've had incidents of students kidnapping their vice chancellors, of workers attacking their registrars. You know, people just feel you can do anything and get away with it. That worries me. that is a national issue, not just about stealing of maize in the Senate.
And that has been
Professor Osumbo, thank you very much. I refer you to an essay written by Lance Morrow. He used to be a senior writer at Time magazine. The title of the essay is a recent one. It says, "The Age of Travesties." Precisely, detailing some of the things happening around the U.S., which we can also contextualize, in what we have just said. But let's take our viewers' reactions now that have come in by way of tweets. Festus Akimboyewa, one of our regulars, has this tweet. Now, what has been taken for granted in some state houses of assembly for years has now happened in the federal legislature, simply because many of those at the helm of affairs in these houses have not led with integrity and social justice. What a shame. Yes.
Yeah, just from Festus. Now we have a Bright here saying every senator is equal among equals, elected and not selected by constituents. Hence, everybody must be justly treated.
And then you have this again. This is from Cecilia. It says, thugs walked freely into the Senate and grabbed the mace. It's a national disgrace.
Yes, and Mike Anyakwa says, what happened in the Senate yesterday was an act of barbarism and comprehensible and incomprehensible, capable of distorting our democracy. The law enforcement agencies must be on top of their duties by arresting the perpetrators of this ugly act, as well as the masterminders for prosecution.
Ibrahim Tudu has this tweet. Now, I think the National Assembly should trace this problem to their doorstep. No smoke without fire. The more you detect, the more you get a result.
All right, and from Boma, he says the invasion of the Red Chambers is a message from the common man to the senators to begin to do things right and get this country on course.
Now, your Twitter handle here is Excellency. It says the invasion of the Senate is an insult to democracy. And I state here categorically that this is a security compromise of the highest order. The federal government should do the needful to prevent future occurrence.
All right. Cecilia Koroma says, as a health manager, the act of invasion or act of suspension could lead to sudden death. Thank God no life was lost.
Mohammed Ajia, let us not lose sight of the genesis of this incident. A senator was illegally, he writes, suspended for expressing an opinion. What kind of Senate is the Nigerian Senate?
All right. Delejak Solomon says, this is dastardly act. It is shameful. We view this as an attack on the democracy, desecration of the hallowed institution of the National Assembly. We therefore call on security agencies to take all necessary actions to ensure the perpetrators and sponsors are brought to justice.
Sani Michael Amakoje, following what happened at the Senate yesterday, I received so many calls from African countries expressing disappointment and amazement.
And of course, from
that should be Jerry Ohua.
Jerry Ohua, where is that of Jerry?
Okay, that's Jerry. Well, let me take that, Kyria. Says, I think what happened yesterday at the Senate chamber was a signal to senators that the legislature is not a secret court that could make rules to expel colleagues at will. Many a time the court had overruled the National Assembly over suspension of members.
That is Niger scribe. If the National Assembly cannot be protected from hoodlums, what is a lot of ordinary Nigerian? What about the ordinary Nigerian? No wonder herdsmen are going on a killing spree across the country and nothing is being done about it. It really shows inept for our country's security system.
Dilo Jack Solomon has the last one we're taking now. He says, this is a dastardly act and it is shameful. We view this as an attack on our democracy and a desecration of the hallowed institution of the National Assembly. We therefore call on security agencies to take all necessary actions to ensure the perpetrators and their sponsors are brought to justice. Now, these are the tweets that we take. We're pressed for time. But for the benefit of our viewers, the two senators, I would like you to speak to this. And then, of course, lawyers will have a better understanding of this. Despite his despite his being on suspension, Senator Agege sat in the chambers. Does that invalidate the decisions of the Senate in the course of the proceedings yesterday? Speak to this very briefly. First, Professor Osumbo.
Well, I am not privy to the details of really the issues concerning Senator Agege and his suspension. But what I want to say quickly is that the Senate has rules. There are rules. Even the House of Reps has its own rules. And every senator ought to comport himself in accordance with the Senate rules. So just listening to some of those comments, once you are a senator, you subscribe to the rules of the Senate. You are bound by those rules. And as they say, the minority may have its say, but the majority will have its way. That is the way democracy works. So there's no other way around it. Every senator must comport himself and conduct himself and respect the rules of Senate. Every senator is given a copy on the inauguration of the Senate. So you can't say you don't know. But outsiders may not know. So the senator must respect those rules.
There are rules and regulations that guide us, and my colleague here said it adequately. And besides, you have to understand, if a senator is suspended and you walk in there with 10 thugs coming there, the only way to get you out is to have a fight, which we didn't want to do. And policemen are not allowed into the secret chambers. So we had to have the proceedings as it happened on national television, the way it was. It's not going to happen today. Trust me, it's not going to happen today because we'll have a better control of our premises today. But it happened yesterday. We could not embarrass ourselves by getting into a fist fight with someone who had been suspended. And I think the Senate President is on top of it, and Ekwerimadu who is around, and that will resolve it. And what he said is accurate and right.
All right,
gentlemen, thank you. At this point, it's a huge issue for now, but of course we know that going forward, that the Senate will be able to sort themselves out, to ensure that this does not continue, and that the issue of Senator Agege will be taken care of properly. And at this point, we'd like to thank you for your contributions this morning on Good Morning Nigeria. First, I would like to thank Professor Osumbo, former governor of Edo State and one-time senator of the Federal Republic, or two-time senator of the Federal Republic. Thank you for coming on Good Morning Nigeria. And of course, Senator and Senator Ben More Bruce, who was one time former Director General of the NTA. Thank you for being part of our show.
Always an honor, always an honor.
Thank you. And of course, Abdurrahman Abu Hamisu, teacher, researcher, and public affairs analyst. You've made a wonderful contribution this morning to the program. Thank you indeed.
Thank you very much, sir. All
right. Good Morning Nigeria continues in just a moment. Stay with us.
Nigerians. Suicide bombers are not spirits. They are not ghosts. They are human beings like you and me. They live amongst us. They are your neighbors. They are your friends today, but terrorists tomorrow. So you must know your neighbor now. Security begins with you and me. Know your neighbor. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me.
If you see something, say something. Nigeria, unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the daring and invincible Louis the Mosquito. Responsible for 200 malaria cases all on its own. Is there anything that can kill Louis? Morphine! Presenting Mortise Power Guard. Its powerful formula kills malaria mosquitoes fast. So, get Mortise Power Guard.
Nigerians. Suicide bombers are not spirits. They are not ghosts. They are human beings like you and me. They live amongst us. They are your neighbors. They are your friends today, but terrorists tomorrow. So you must know your neighbor now. Security begins with you and me. Know your neighbor. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me.
If you see something, say something. Nigeria, unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
All right, you're welcome back. But if you just joined us, it's still Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We just finished discussing the invasion of the Senate, and we'll still have another subject matter relating to the National Assembly. Now, for several legislative years, the National Assembly grappled with the enactment of a modern and effective legal framework for the governance of Nigeria's oil and gas industry.
And not much success was actually achieved until recently, when the Senate and House of Representatives passed the Petroleum Industry Governance Bill.
Now, the PIGB, as it is called, is one of 4 bills that will form the backbone of the legal regime for the petroleum industry. The other 3 bills, which remain work in progress, include host community matters and fiscal as well as taxation issues in the industry.
However, the applause that greeted the passage of the PIGB may appear to have been premature, as stakeholders point to certain institutional provisions in the bill that could be inimical to the efficiency objective in the governance of the sector. One such lingering concern has to do with the status of the regulator of the oil and gas sector. And we have 2 discussants to do justice to these concerns.
First, I would like to welcome at this time Dr. Peter Ozoison, who is the Secretary General of the General Secretary of the Nigerian Labour Congress. Dr. Ozoison, pleasure to have you again on Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning.
Okay.
And of course, Comrade Francis Olabode Johnson, Pengasson National President. Welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning, Nigerians.
All right, gentlemen, after several years of delay, the National Assembly eventually passed the PIG bill. This should be good news, isn't it? Let's begin with the National President of Pengasson.
Well, for us as Pengasson, a major stakeholder in the industry, it's a good news. And it has made that for several years, it has been something that has been the mainstay of the National Assembly for over 7 or 8 years. And it's high time that we have that kind of law, legal framework that will regulate the operations of the industry. So it's a good news for us. And we commend the National Assembly, the 2 houses of the House Senate and the House of Reps. We commend them for this.
All right, Dr. Ozoison, your perspective?
Well, I think that passing the governance bill was something that was desirable. The content of it, in totality, I think needs to be looked at because there are concerns. For instance, that we then create a regulatory framework in which you have a regulatory commission that will combine regulatory functions both upstream and downstream. Actually creates a new behemoth, as it were. And the issues requiring regulatory intervention in the downstream are clearly different from the issues of regulation upstream. For us as stakeholders, and I talk for anytime there is price increase, for instance, in the downstream, you see Nigerians concerned. And Nigerian Labour Congress and other stakeholders are usually involved in these contestations. We therefore think that what this bill has done would create a situation in which the environment of stakeholder discussion that then governs the downstream would be completely lost. And to that extent, we think that there is really a problem. We're going to create a new problem which will lead to instability and tension, particularly relating to issues that need to be regulated at the downstream sector.
Now, these concerns have been raised, right? And, the bill has now been passed. Now, what are those regulatory concerns that you are talking about? I would like you to come in here. What are those regulatory concerns which this bill did not address?
Well, borrowing what he has said, is basically that there must be two regulators in the industry. Like I said, when you look at the PPRA, the downstream regulatory is supposed to be in charge of PMS, kerosene, household issues. And so when you have a single regulatory like what happened in Venezuela, it's going to build, dictatorial tendencies. And it's not too good for the industry. Because the essence of the PIGB being passed is to make sure that things are properly done. So we don't look for a way to create another problem by not doing the right thing. That's why we're also saying that there must be two regulators to govern the operation of the industry.
No, when you say, Mr. Johnson, when you say there must be two regulators, what are you looking at? Dr. Zoeson here is saying, look, upstream and downstream. The immediate background to regulation before the passage of the PIG bill, of course, which hasn't become law yet, is that we always had a DPR, that is Department of Petroleum Resources. Are the inadequacies or the gaps in the experience with the DPR sufficiently now addressed in the PIG bill, bill as passed by the National Assembly, Dr. Zoeson?
I think that's really the crux of the problem. You see, initially we had just DPR. Then came the issues about pricing, the issues of supply shortages and all that. And that led to a lot of tension in the country. And that is what gave rise to the setting up of the Badamosi Committee. And following from that, ultimately a new regulator specific for the downstream, which is the PPPROA, came into being. And the crucial element of that model is that it was largely a stakeholders forum. It created a platform in which the governance, in terms of the board structure, was made up of all stakeholders. So you have marketers, you have the unions in the oil industry, you have NLC, so all interests, including established professional groups. And that has created a forum where all indices can be looked at. And therefore, when it comes to issues, whether of pricing, people are able to at least use that forum to mediate what positions are taken. In the current regulatory body that is set up, that stakeholder character is completely set aside. It doesn't exist. And therefore, we are saying that, yes, those stakeholders do not need to engage issues in upstream. So we are not concerned about getting stakeholders into this new huge structure. But if you preserve that in a regulatory body for the downstream, which would still retain that stakeholders' character, that is likely to be more enduring going forward.
Is it a matter of, excuse me, is it a matter of endurance or a matter of, endurance and efficiency? Because again, I want to stay with you, Dr. Zoeson. Part of the objective in the Petroleum Industry Governance Bill, or the reforms we are having in the oil and gas sector, is the unbundling of the NNPC, and then the presence, obviously, of many more players. Now, in terms of efficiency and effectiveness of regulation, what do you foresee? You're also an economist, by the way, where you now have many more players. atomistic players, and then a single regulator as provided for in the current governance bill as passed by the National Assembly.
Yeah, this is partly the problem. We are moving from a situation in which we say you need to break NNPC into different components, and then you want more players in the industry. And then you're creating a new huge commission, which is the Regulatory Commission. So the issue of, opening up and, participation, you are doing that in the industry, but you are aggregating the regulatory into one. And we think that in terms of efficiency, it is clear that though if you a regulatory agency focus on the issues of the downstream, is likely to be more efficient than one that is focused dealing with issues of environmental concerns in the upstream, dealing with various community issues in the upstream and all that. And then still looking at the issues of pricing, issues of measurements, issues of quality of products and availability of products. And we believe that these, things are completely different. Our efficiency will be better served if you had a targeted, specialized regulatory agency dealing with those issues that Nigerians see on a day-to-day basis more in the downstream, and allow a more targeted regulator in the upstream that will deal with these other issues. We think that that promotes more efficiency than to create a new, huge bureaucracy in a regulatory framework that may then do for the upstream and the downstream has, peaked issues that may not be in depth.
Now, gentlemen, let us understand this. All right. You are saying that the PIB did not take cognizance of the fact that it's creating another huge bureaucracy that could be inimical to the regulatory aspect of this bill. And I'd like Johnson to come in here. What is the ideal situation? What would you think would have been better that will, of course, bring about efficiency in this sector?
Well, like he has said, the essence of it is to have a very, very effective and efficient industry that things work properly. And when you also look at it, looking at the issue of the downstream, because it's key that the major, the major derivatives Nigeria drive are the things that get to Nigerian masses. And so when you also now completely put it in one regulatory body, like I said, because when you look at the upstream deal with marginal fees, IOC, and all those kind of things, but you now put it in one place, definitely bureaucracy sets in, and interference and free hand also comes to play. And looking at the critical stakeholders, if there's going to be regulatory prices and everything, the stakeholders that are also involved, like the labor, energy, all of that are involved, so that if there are issue of prices and everything that can also cause unrest, definitely you're also going to guide against it. And the essence of it, because we also look at it that when we're also doing public hearing, these are things we stated. But the danger to keep happening is that when they are doing the public hearing, when the final bill is also going to be taken, I think there should be a way that the National Assembly can get to the stakeholders that, okay, after the public hearing session, this is the final bill we are also looking at, so that you can also make corrections. We are input also, because these are things that are also stated in the public hearing. But at the end of it, when they do public hearing, the laborers or critical stakeholders are also not carried along. And how do you lobby as a labor? How do you not start lobbying and everything? What we can do is doing advocacy, appealing to their conscience and everything. But once it's passed, instead of being reactive, we have been proactive by saying these are our opinion at the public hearing, and we expect that if you are going to do the final bill, it's also better that the stakeholders are also invited that this is the final draft of this bill. And let's see if your issues have also been carpeted, if your issues have also been taken, so that it becomes something that every stakeholder will also be part of it.
Thanks a lot, Comrade Johnson. I'm wondering, Dr. Ozoeson, you said in your opening statement that, yes, it's heartwarming that the PIGB has been passed by the National Assembly, but we should, the concern has to do with some of the provisions by way of contents of the bill as passed. Well, I'm wondering, what do you think would have played? I mean, it said that in law, the business of the court is to discover the intention of the legislature. But what intention is probably embedded here? For instance, if one took a current view of the state of the downstream sector, you would say there isn't much. But going forward, considering the number of issues we have always discussed on this program, if you were to have an expansion in the number of refineries, for instance, whose business would that be? And then all the issues arising in terms of marketing, in terms of pricing, and so on and so forth. Would there be sufficient work, for instance, for a second regulator, this time in the downstream sector?
Oh, clearly. Even as of now, where we do not have the multiple players, even as of now in which we do not have a number of independent non-governmental refineries, you'll find that there are regulatory challenges specific to the downstream. By the time you have more refineries, by the time you have more players, you're going to have a greater need and a greater job for regulation or a regulator in the downstream. So actually what we ought to be doing is strengthening and broadening the responsibilities of the downstream regulator, not to be taking them and along with the upstream. So going down into the future in a dynamic sense, the need for more effective regulation in the downstream will grow. And therefore, we need a strengthened downstream regulator to be able to take on those challenges in the interest of consumers generally.
Now, Nigerians as consumers of refined petroleum products are much more worried about the activities in the downstream sector of the oil and gas. And these worries are in terms of supply, distribution, and appropriate pricing. Now, are you agreeing with the fact that there should be a separate regulator for the downstream sector? And assuming the argument is, cogent, for two regulators. Now, what will be the interface between the upstream and the downstream? I think both of you can take this question. Let me start with those.
Well, the interface between the upstream and the downstream, actually, there is virtually one. It's like one pipe that the upstream crude will, as we have domestic refining capacity, the framework of supply of crude to the refineries is the link that exists there. And it does not require one regulator to do that, because the supply, the purchase, the pipelining of crude to refineries will be an issue for the upstream regulator. But once that is done, there is really no relationship anymore between the activities of the downstream and that of the upstream. Because you see, in some countries, you do not even have an upstream, but you have a downstream. You have countries that do not produce crude, and they refine products, they distribute products, they have pipelines to distribute products, they price those products. That's the downstream. And to the extent that you have regulators in such countries, that is the same thing we're saying, replicate here. Have that regulator that deals with the downstream issues. But because we are also a crude producing country, we also need to have a regulator to deal with upstream issues. That's the argument.
Yeah, well, Johnson, let's get your take on this. My colleague asked about what the relationship will be between the upstream regulator and the downstream regulator, assuming the argument is bought that there is a need for a downstream regulator.
Like I said, prior to now, definitely DPR has its own main functions. I also look at the metamorphosis of DPR, and it is also to solve the problem of supply, distribution, and everything that. And that was set up in, I think, 1993 by the then government to have PPRA. That's to have a regulatory agency to also guide against this thing. But the major problem is also having about the issue of supply, distribution, and also, the state of our refineries, and which the government also intended and also committed to look at financial experts to also make sure that things are also properly improved. and also have multiple players in the industry that they can also make sure that these are things that are properly done. And when these are done properly, definitely the interface will also be there that upstream and downstream can also have a meeting point that things are done effectively. Because the most important aspect of it is that the industry must be, run very effectively and very efficiently. So that Nigerians can also, for some few months now, you can see the stability. But by the time our refineries are put in good shape, during the efforts of the federal government and everything, definitely there improvement. And then with the coming on board of Dangote refinery, these are issues that are also going to also put an end to it.
I'm wondering, gentlemen, this question is something that often engages analysts and public commentators. There's complaint often about the failure of regulation. How regulators have not been up to speed, have not taken up on the assignment. What do you envisage for the oil and gas industry under the current provisions of the PIG bill? Is there a likelihood of failure of regulation, or you are just more worried about the behemoth that is being created as a regulatory commission? Dr. Zoeson.
Well, I think it is the fear that the regulation is not likely to be effective, because you're going to be, the regulator will be facing and charged with too many functions that are not related. And therefore,
directly related.
That are not related.
Okay.
Looking at the issues, for instance, of pricing of products, it's not related to what you are doing in the upstream. Looking at the issue of adequate measurements of dispensing of products, it's not related to what is happening. So you're going to have these unrelated issues with one regulator. And apart from that, is that when you have one omnibus regulator, if you do suffer what at times the problem of regulatory capture, and in the oil industry, it's a very serious matter because of the strength and the power of the operators. If you take the major oil players, international oil companies, what used to be referred to as the Seven Sisters and all that, they are so powerful. They are more powerful than governments. And therefore, the ability to have the problem of regulatory capture is very real. And if you didn't have that, then even for the downstream sector, that they would not normally have exercised such a power. You now have everything sucked under the influence of such powerful monopolistic entities in the oil industry that would then have succeeded in capturing the regulator.
So you are envisaging that there will not be efficient regulation, regulation if the PIB stands as it is at the moment, based on the content of that bill. And I would like to ask, what you're advocating, is it the opinion or the position of all the stakeholders in the oil industry?
Yeah. Like if we look at the composition of the PRA, like I said, all the stakeholders are involved. And what I can remember, what also stabilizes it is that for a long time now there have been price increase, stepping down. Because when you see the major players, that's going to also address labor issues and make sure that Nigerians don't overreact and cause crisis. They are also involved. So they must guide the flow of increase and regular increase of prices so that they can be stable. And if it's affordable, and if Nigeria has seen it, if all the products are there, kerosene, everything is available, definitely.
Nigerians are more concerned about the downstream sector now. And what would it portend for the downstream sector if what you're advocating is not met?
Then there will be more crisis. There will be.
Tell us something. I mean, Ozoe-san, you've been in the thick of all of this, and of course, Penga-san as well, because I'm sorry, you're all labor. I wanted to say you're all laborers. We're all laborers, Gentlemen, you've been in this. What has been the magic, in terms of having joint stakeholders, being participants, in seeking to give direction and control to the downstream sector that we have had some relative stability?
You see, because we have a stakeholder forum, which is the board of PPPROA, which was basically the downstream regulator. you had this benefit that before things developed to a crisis situation, you are able to deal with them. Let me give you a concrete example. When late last year, the marketers started throwing kites that they can no longer sustain this price, and that problem continued. The board was able, with themselves as members, came together, and after discussing every issue on the table, both they and all other stakeholders agreed that Nigerians could not, for them, take another price increase. Yes. And therefore, they should look for alternative ways, things that needed to be done in order to sustain that price. Yeah. They went back and came back with suggestions, among which were the difficulties they were having in sourcing foreign exchange at the official price and all that. And, through government recommendations were then made how to get the central bank to come to their aid and all that. So through that stakeholder situation, we were able to resolve what was clearly going to be a crisis-generating situation. And I think that needs to be preserved.
Gentlemen, time is not on our side at the moment, but I'd like people to look at the situation as it is. The PI has been passed, right? And, you're advocating something that is not part of the content of that bill. Now, what is the way forward?
Okay. Well, the way forward, and graciously, it has not it becomes law when the president has assented it. And that's why we also have engaged the relevant stakeholder, that the National Assembly, House of Reps, in the Senate, and also the presidency. And what we're also saying, and essentially, the main cause of this is that we are using this forum to also let the National Assembly know that if there is any public hearing on any sensitive issues, and we have taken every opinion, they have the committees, in finally agreeing on what is good, the stakeholders will also be involved and say, these are the things, are your views properly captured, so that we don't avoid crisis. And look at, depending on what he has said, there will have been price increase. But we look into so many scenarios that, as at now, it's not avoidable. The supply is not there. And the markets are also complaining that the government is also in there. So if you can pay all those kind of things, them as stakeholders, if there are price increases now, you're also going to be on that, also going to call on government that this thing must be reduced. And so, effectively, by being in that process of this, we also have to nip it in, but looking at the general masses and the situation in the country as at now. So that is just the essence of it. And
the way forward. Well, like I said, yes, the National Assembly has already passed as it is. And therefore, the only options to avoid this happening is Mr. President withholding his assent. The stakeholders have actually, even formally, put these concerns to Mr. President in writing. And we hope that that process will allow a return to look at this bill before any law actually comes on board.
All right, you wanted to say something, Johnson?
Yes, the borrowing to all this. I'll give you 2 examples. Look at when Lagos State Governor Fashola was the Lagos State Governor. And there was a law that was passed, and the body of benchers opposed it and look at it. And he withheld the decision and said, okay, let the process also be proper, so that the body of benchers can also be taken into consideration and look at it. They also look at the issue of the amendment bill. Which also the president also said, for me to SYZ should be done. So I'm appealing to the National Assembly that if this happens, let's look at it in the larger interest of the Nigerian society and the masses.
All right, Comrade Francis Olabode Johnson, National President of Pengasant, we'd like to thank you for being with us on Good Morning Nigeria today. Our appreciation also to Dr. Peter Ozoeson, that's the General Secretary of the Nigeria Labour Congress. Thanks a lot for your insights.
Thank you.
All right, so that does it for our 2 topics on Good Morning Nigeria today. Let's go over now to our complimentary segments, and we're hearing now from our sports desk.
Nigeria now has only one representative, Eyimba International FC, left in the CAF Confederation.